Bridge payments from the federal government. Did you apply for one? Do you think you're going to get one? What's your rate going to be? Welcome to the Farm Show here on Westplex Talk 1045. I'm your host, John Combest. Before I forget, you can always find old episodes, let me say archived episodes of the Farm Show on YouTube at Farm Show Radio. You know, usually in this first segment of the show, which we call A Block, we focus on local events, maybe some Missouri statewide events dealing with agriculture. But I think the Bridge program news is so important and so relevant to our pocketbooks that we have to start there. If you missed it, on New Year's Eve, that would be on Wednesday, the Trump administration via the USDA announced the commodity payment rates for the Farm Bridge Assistance Program. So here's what we'll do. We'll go through the official announcement from the USDA, from the Trump administration. Then we'll take a look at, I think we could call it a critical view from DTN Progressive Farmer, reporter Chris Clayton. And then we'll also hear an interview from a couple weeks back from Missouri Ag Director Chris Chinn, because I think Chris did a great job, as she usually does, in putting in plain language what these bridge payments are all about. Then after that, we'll talk about a Missouri event involving cattle. And if we have time, we'll also talk about an agriculture company announcing a new plant right on the banks of the Mississippi River. So let's start with the official USDA announcement. The headline from the USDA on Wednesday. USDA announces commodity payment rates for Farmer Bridge Assistance Program. And here's what the USDA said. Today, USDA Secretary of Agriculture, Brooke Rollins, announced the next phase in the Farmer Bridge Assistance Program, or FBA, the eligible commodity per acre payment rates. As announced earlier this month by President Trump and Secretary Rollins, $12 billion will be paid to American farmers in 2026. Of that amount, $11 billion consists of one-time FBA program payments. This is in response to 4 years of disastrous Biden administration policies that created record high input and production costs, zero new trade deals, and a forgotten rural America. Here's the quote from Rollins. President Trump committed to increase certainty in the farm economy, and farmers can count on these payment rate calculations when going to the bank as they plan for the spring planting season. Putting farmers first means delivering real relief when it matters. Farmers who qualify for the FBA program can expect payments in their bank accounts by February 28th, 2026. These one-time payments give farmers the bridge to continue to feed and clothe America and the world while the Trump administration continues opening new markets and strengthening the farm safety net. USDA is making this process as simple and seamless as possible so producers can focus on what they do best, feeding and fueling our nation. End of quote. Now here's the money line, so to speak. Below are the payment rates for the FBA eligible commodities that triggered a payment. Per acre payment rates for corn, $44.36. For soybeans, $30.88. Sorghum, $48.11. And wheat, $39.35. If you're looking for the full list of commodity bridge payment rates, you can go to USDA.gov. Now, the USDA notes that FBA payments are based on a 2025 planted acres, Economic Research Service, cost of production, and the World Agriculture Supply and Demand Estimate Report, or WASTE as it's known. Double crop acres, including all initial and subsequently planted crops, are eligible. Prevent plant acres are not eligible. All intended row crop uses are eligible for FBA except grazing, volunteer stands, experimental, green manure, crops left standing, and abandoned or cover crops. Crop insurance linkage is not required. However, USDA strongly urges producers to take advantage of the new risk management tools provided for in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act to best protect against future price risk and volatility. The OBBBA federal crop insurance improvements include expanding benefits for beginning farmers and ranchers, increasing coverage options, and making crop insurance more affordable. Okay, so from there, the USDA goes on to include a bunch of what I think is superfluous information. We won't get into that. Let's get into the piece from DTN Progressive Farmer. You can find this by going to dtnpf.com. That's dtnprogressivefarmer.com. And the reporter is DTN Ag Policy Editor Chris Clayton. I think it's fair to describe Mr. Clayton as no fan of the Trump administration. So let's take a little bit more critical look of this announcement. The headline from Chris Clayton is USDA lays out FBA payment details. Here's how Chris puts together his piece. USDA on Wednesday released the per acre payment rates for the $11 billion Farmer Bridge Assistance Program. The FBA was announced earlier this month by President Donald Trump. And we should note here that Chris Clayton was actually working on New Year's Eve, December 31st. So when he says earlier this month, he of course means December. FBA payments will go to farmers based on 2025 planted acres. The formula created for payments was based on the Wasty report, as well as reports on planted acres. USDA noted that prevented planting acres are not eligible for FBA payments. Chris goes on to lay out the basic facts of the commodity rates and then continues, the payment limit will be $155,000 per entity or individual. Unlike other aid programs, USDA will not require linkage for crop insurance to receive a payment. USDA, though, also, quote, strongly urges, end quote, farmers to use crop insurance and noted certain insurance policies were improved under the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. In announcing the payments, USDA blamed the need for aid on, quote, 4 years of disastrous Biden administration policies that created a record high input and production costs. And then Chris includes the rest of the quote from the press release. Chris continues, farm income has declined since hitting its peak in 2022 as commodity prices have fallen while input prices have remained high. Export values have also fallen since then, primarily due to China reducing its imports of commodities. The FBA payments mark the second round of ad hoc payments farmers will receive in less than a year. Last spring, USDA released $10 billion in aid because of low prices for the 2024 to 2025 crop under the Emergency Commodity Assistance Program, or ECAP, that was funded by an act signed by then-President Joe Biden a year ago. Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins said farmers should expect the FBA payments, drum roll, and their bank accounts by February 28th. Then Chris goes on to quote the line in the press release from Brooke Rollins. Along with the crops listed, FBA payments will go to producers of chickpeas, lentils, oats, peanuts, peas, canola, flax, mustard, rapeseed, safflower, sesame, and sunflower. The remaining $1 billion of the $12 billion in FBA payments will be reserved for commodities not covered in the FBA program, such as specialty crops and sugar, for example, though details including timelines for those payments are still under development and require additional understanding of market impacts and economic needs. So this was the piece from Chris Clayton. You can tell it's probably a little bit more critical of the announcement and also includes a little bit more of a favorable view of Joe Biden's effect on agriculture. I mentioned a moment ago a podcast that our very own Missouri Ag Director, Chris Chinn was on. It's called the Bulk Loads podcast. You can find it on YouTube by going to Bulk Loads. That's BulkLoads. It's hosted by the co-founder of BulkLoads, which is Jared Flynn, and his last name is spelled Flinn. Jared asked Director Chinn about these bridge payments and some of these payments to farmers. Jared asked, is any of this covered by the state? How much of it is federal? Chris did a great job explaining. Let's cut right to her right now.
So the bridge payments, I think, is what you're talking about, that we've heard a lot about in the news lately. That is actually a USDA funded program. It's coming through the Commodity Credit Corporation funding at USDA. To qualify for that, it goes off your previous year planting numbers. And so if you're a first-year farmer and you don't have last year to go off of, you're not going to qualify for any of that bridge payment money. But if you've been farming for a few years, you had planted acres last year, you need to report your numbers to your county farm service agency, I believe before December the 19th, and hopefully before February 28th, they will have a bridge payment out that will help bring farmers back up closer to that break-even level. It's not going to get them there, but it is going to hopefully help them be able to get their line of credits renewed so that they can plant a crop this next growing season.
So when you hear about like subsidies and farmers getting paid, more than likely that's usually coming from a federal level, not really state. Okay.
Yeah, those are all federal programs. There's no state-funded program for that. That's what your U.S. Department of Agriculture is there to do. They have all the farm service agencies, and that's what they do is roll out those farm programs. Those are not money makers for the farmers. They're just there for emergency use in times of need. Like when we had drought, we've had 3 years of drought in the state of Missouri, so there has been some disaster payments that's come through that. And it's just to help you get to that next growing season where hopefully you're going to be able to turn a profit. But unfortunately for many of our farms in the state of Missouri, we just haven't seen that in the last couple of years because we've had 3 years of drought.
So on those drought years, even when the governor announces state of emergency, the funds are still coming from a federal level, not state level.
Yes, it's all federal funding.
Okay. How does the state work with the federal government? And I just didn't know, I know Brooke Rollins is the Secretary of Ag for the United States, but how does that work, the flow of information or working with each state, and especially Missouri being a big ag state?
So we work closely with Department of Ag. As I mentioned earlier, we carry out a lot of programs on their behalf. But when it comes to the Farm Service Agency, they truly do stand alone. One of the things that we do is we can help with county assessments. So we hear from farmers all the time about the droughts and or the floods that we have in the state. And so we will relay that information to our counterparts at the State Farm Service Agency office and let them know what we're hearing, what we're seeing. We will also ask them for disaster declarations for them to go and look in a county for a disaster declaration. Many times they're already on top of that. But if there's going to be any assistance, you have to make sure that your county gets declared a disaster, either from a secretarial designation under U.S. Secretary Brooke Rollins or from a governor standpoint. And they can also do a presidential one as well from the President of the United States. But your most common one is either from a governor or the secretary.
All right. Again, that was from the Bulk Loads podcast. You can find those folks on YouTube by looking up Bulk Loads, BulkLoads. That was hosted by Jared Flynn. The full episode, actually, the whole thing is awesome. I may play clips of that again in the future. Moving on, we have a big event, the 2026 Missouri Cattle Industry Convention and Trade Show, held at the Margarita Lake Resort. You may remember it back in the day as Tantera in Osage Beach, Missouri, January 21st through the 23rd. You can pre-register by going to MoCattle.org. That's MoCattle.org. And if you've never been, here's how the folks from MoCattle describe it. Cattle producers and industry partners from around the state will gather to discuss policy, learn about new technologies, catch up with old friends, and see some new faces along the way. The theme for this year is Forging the Future. as we navigate the ever-changing terrain of the beef cattle industry together. The convention is set to take place on January 21st to the 23rd. Registration is open and available online at MoCattle.com. Before we go to break, I mentioned a piece of news about an ag company establishing itself, a plant, on the banks of the Mississippi River. We're going to go to The Scoop magazine. You know, the editor there is Margy Eckelkamp, the incomparable Margy Eckelkamp. Here's what Margy had to say about the facility. Growmark expands St. Louis manufacturing with biologicals production plant. Margy writes, after acquiring AgReform in 2024, Growmark continues to expand the St. Louis site with the construction of a biological crop input manufacturing plant. This announcement was made on December 17th. And then a quote from Growmark's Senior VP of Strategy and Logistics named Rod Wells. The scientific advancements in agricultural biologicals have introduced innovative methods for farmers to safeguard their plants and improve soil health with more sustainable options. It's beneficial for both farmers and consumers when we enable farmers to grow healthier and stronger crops using these sustainable practices. Margy writes, expected to be operational for production in 2027, the manufacturing facility will produce biostimulants, biopesticides, and biofertilizers. The company says it's also building capacity to manufacture animal biological and waste treatment products. Growmark says the demand for biological products, and therefore manufacturing of those products, has outpaced what companies are able to produce. Growmark's VP Brad Drake says, as demand for biological products continues to grow across the ag industry, the construction of the new manufacturing plant will allow Growmark to provide high-quality biological products made in the United States to stakeholders throughout North America. It also allows Growmark to influence another critical point in the ag value chain to better serve its members and customers. Again, you can find that piece from Margy Eckelkamp by going to thedailyscoop.com. That's thedailyscoop.com. When we come back, a few production tips from a noted agronomist. You're listening to The Farm Show. That's Farm and Ranch, Missouri, right here on Westplex Talk 104.5. We'll be right back.